95% of the people who could buy from you as a business aren't ready to buy, and your website's probably built for that last 5%. By the time a buyer finally reaches out to you, they've already made up their mind.
Yeah, there's a study on this from 6sense actually. 94% of B2B buyers rank their preferred vendors before first contact. That pre-contact favorite ultimately wins 77% of the time.
So basically, the deal's already done and decided before the sales call, before any demos, before anyone fills out even a single form on the website.
Yeah, which means the most important work your website does happens way earlier than most people actually think. How do you win someone over before they're ready to talk to you? That's basically what we're talking about today. The industry has a name for this, for what we're talking about. It's called buyer enablement. Gartner and Brent Adamson popularized the term in 2018, but honestly, it sounds a little bit like consultant speak to me, to be honest. I think you had a way better way of framing this last time we spoke about this idea.
Yeah, basically, I mean, buyer enablement is a very technical term. Like, I got why you would use that, but helping, not selling, is kind of like more relatable and a better goal for most organizations. Helping people learn, helping people decide, helping people to do the jobs that they need to do as potential customers long before they're ready to buy.
For sure. And I'm sure there's like some people who are skeptical about this approach. It's been around since 2018. So I hope that there's not as much skepticism. But someone who might be listening is like, well, why would I spend money and invest in helping people who aren't even customers yet?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the data speaks for itself, right? 95-5 split. So at any given moment, 95% of the potential market is not buying. They're at various stages of the buying cycle, but they're not currently actively looking to buy. So you've got two options. You can either basically fight over that tiny sliver who are shopping today, which, I mean, that's a necessity. Everyone needs to be bringing on new clients. Or, the other option is you start building trust with everyone else so that you become the brand that's in the forefront of everyone's mind when they do enter the buying cycle. Or, the other option is to just sit and do nothing. And then your brand slowly erodes and no one thinks about you when they're ready to buy.
Yeah, just you're screaming into the void at that point. And like, let's be fair about the number too. So like 95/5, you said, it is a rule. It's not like a law of physics. And I think Forrester frames this fairly well. They say that the 5% is often too low depending on the category because there's some variance, but directionally it's pretty spot on. Like any given day, the vast majority of the people you want to reach are not actively in the market. And there's one thing that really stuck with me. Gartner found that B2B buyers spend about 17% of their total time meeting with potential suppliers. And that's like all suppliers combined. Again, that 17% is still fairly loose from Gartner, but the rest of these customers, these buyers, they go to independent research. So outside of that 17%, they're doing their own independent research, internal discussions, and all of this work to reach consensus, all without you.
17, wow. And that's across every vendor they're considering. So it's a pretty substantial number, like less than a quarter of the time that a potential prospect, well, substantially less than a quarter of the entire time they research a potential solution is spent on actually talking to vendors, many vendors. So we might be getting like 5% of their attention across that 17% total.
So the other 95% of the time that they're on your site, they're searching, they're asking other people, they're asking AI, which is now more of a convention these days too.
Yeah, that's now 60% of B2B buyers now use AI tools during the buying process, which makes sense.
Crazy.
I mean, like for AI tools, it was Google searching. Like whatever the research option is, like people are going to use it. The easier that it is, the more they're going to use it, I think.
Yeah, that's just the reality. We do the exact same thing. We're no different than these B2B buyers that we're talking about. And like more than 80% of them say that AI does speed up the decision. So the research is there. What used to take weeks now happens in an afternoon with an assistant that doesn't really talk to your sales team at all, which is why everyone's scrambling for this whole SEO, AEO, GEO side of things too.
Yeah. And we just did an episode on AEO, GEO, which we'll add at the end of the link, but it just raises the stakes on everything else. If your site is what the AI reads and repeats back, you're in the running. If it isn't, you potentially don't exist. And if you don't have a strategy to engage when people are not buying, then you a higher percentage of just not existing.
It's true. Yeah, that's the shift. Buyer does almost all of the work alone before you've even got into the room with them. And that's buyer enablement. Sorry, helping, not selling. It's just deciding to be useful during a buyer's journey, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so everyone agrees that helping, not selling, is an important way to address the buyer journey. Everyone's excited about that. The problem is everyone goes off and builds the wrong thing.
Yes, there's definitely some nuance, and I think it's sort of a moving target, which is why it takes time and effort. People sometimes go and build more of the thing that's already failing. So, things like more blog posts, more gated PDFs. Gartner's actual point in 2018 wasn't make more content. It was the opposite. Buyers are drowning in content. They're overwhelmed. So when you add another white paper or you add another public piece of content, you're not really helping them decide. You're sort of making it harder for them to decide. So I think part of the analysis, and obviously content is important because of search, AEO, and you want to develop an audience, and hopefully people find you and they find your content is valuable enough that you do develop some level of audience. It's one piece of the puzzle, but that you need to do much more of an analysis to find out how to be the most effective, basically.
Yeah, and people are just going to be dropping white papers into their AI agents anyways. So no one's reading that stuff anymore, at length at least. So content, when it is out there, it needs to be digestible, scannable, all of those best practices around user experience design, but applied to content strategy. So yeah, the goal isn't more, it's helping them finish an actual job, get the number they need, compare two options honestly, and justify the spend to the board or their boss, right? And it's that last piece, the justification to other people, that's more important than everyone realizes. The person on your site is most likely not even the decision maker. They're likely the person that's collecting all of the collateral to help other people make the decision, and they have to come to the table to sell you internally. And there's data on that exactly. 72% of buyers share content with relevant team members, and among their colleagues who receive that content, 57% download it and review it. So it's important to be available and make that content and those tools available to a broader audience within the organization.
Yeah, and that's just, data for content. It's probably much harder to measure it for digital tools or things like that. But a good tool or a good piece of content is really an internal selling tool and a brand builder and potentially a community builder. If you've got a long-term strategy, you're really trying to arm your champions to win an argument in a meeting that you'll potentially never be in, or help to educate to make better decisions when the decision-making time comes up.
Yeah, so if the answer is to help them, the obvious question is help them do what exactly? And this is where most companies just genuinely have no clue about what to do or where to take this information.
Yeah, totally. It's because they don't know their own buyer well enough to say which job matters, what is the real problem. But I want to flag that and keep moving because it's a whole episode on its own, and we're going to do an entire episode on ideal client profile and really understanding your buyer, because we've gone through that iteration in our business ourselves, and it just makes a huge difference to really spend the time understanding who you're selling to, what their challenges are. So we're actually going to do a full workshop episode on that. Today, we're assuming we've got at least a rough idea of who you're helping. The question we're answering now is, once I know the job, what do I actually build?
Yeah.
So think about this. Think about it as a ladder. There's good, better, best. A lot of it's based on how much you're able to invest.
Yeah. And I really like this idea of a ladder. Good, better, best gives you these options. And obviously the bottom rung is going to be the cheapest, the most cost effective. And you don't really have many excuses for the bottom rung. So just start. An easy entry point, we're going to go through a few examples here just of work that we've either done or work that we've seen to illustrate this stuff in action. So with good, the entry point is helpful content that answers a real repeated question. For example, we get asked about accessibility constantly. Everyone's terrified of it in the US and Canada. The rules are confusing, the legislation is dense, people are scared of getting it wrong. So instead of just writing about it, we actually partnered with a company called Accessible, and we put their accessibility checker tool right on our website for people to run their own websites through. You get a report. It's genuinely good enough to hand over to one of your developers, and you can leave with something that's actionable, useful, if you're compliant or not, and it's an amazing takeaway. Whether they come back or not, it doesn't matter. We're just happy that someone out there is concerned enough to test accessibility and ideally remediate it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a great example. The reason why we chose the example is just to kind of like expand thinking a little bit. It's a good partner example. So thinking about partners and vendors that you work with in your sort of like day-to-day life in organizations, like how can you collaborate to create tools that are inexpensive for either of you to create, develop, and or extend, but are really high impact. And then as you move up the ladder, there's the better examples. This is where you build an actual tool around a decision your buyer's trying to make.
This is where the tool becomes core to how a business actually runs. One of the examples we have is a national organization we worked with that sold education and certifications. Their issue was that prospective buyers, students in this case, they couldn't figure out where to even start based off of their existing qualifications. Like, it was a very complicated buyer journey. People would come and leave and then come back months later. Sometimes it's a multi-year effort to figure out even if they want to commit to this education. And people told us flat out that this just wasn't working. There was tons of drop off, lots of complaints, so many questions to their sales team and their support team. So we built an interactive experience that helps the buyers navigate and answer all of their own questions, but through to a final decision and an eventual transaction.
With real impact, revenue goes up, profit goes up. It stopped being a brochure and started being an actual tool. So, these projects are typically higher investment, but I think there's more intention on, driving actual returns with a lot of these types of projects on the sort of like best rung.
Yeah. And I mean, that one was multifaceted in what it gained and what it took away too. It removed a ton of support calls, and it also increased stickiness for their prospects and gave them a way to self-serve. Obviously, one caveat of all of this, don't go build the flashy, most expensive thing right out of the gate. And I think we talked briefly about this, but there's a stat floating around there that interactive seems to be losing some of its shine. The share of buyers who wanted content to interactively tell a story for their buying committee fell from 49% to 39%. Like, that's drastic.
Yeah, a bad interactive tool is slower than a good plain checklist. If your calculator takes 5 minutes and gives me nothing, or if the interaction is non-essential, I'd rather just have a PDF checklist or something.
Yeah, that's true. And we even have like static templates on our own site, things that you can just take away, read about, fill on your own. So I don't think the bar is purely interactive. I think everyone wants to do something digital out of the gate, but that's not always the answer. So the bar is it useful and fast to do? The best tools that we've talked about, they feel like the buyer's own spreadsheet, but they're able to use it. It's not marketing. It's a tool for them to take away or use and get something back from.
Yeah, and another really important aspect of this is this is just a jump off point. Like, once you launch, you have to really start thinking about, you need to start thinking about right from the beginning, like, what happens at launch? How do we integrate these tools with sales? How is it used in the sales process? This is really, I think, where a lot of the siloing happens between marketing and sales. These tools and projects get built, but the intentionality behind them doesn't include enough of the sales team and sales execution.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think like roughly a third of buyers still want to talk to humans. The tools are not replacing that conversation. If anything, they're tools that should be easily sent to prospects from your sales staff. So integrated into the sales process.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you're overwhelmed, the good news is you don't have to do all of this.
Yeah, you pick one. What's the real question your buyer's stuck on, and you build the one thing that's going to help them get past it.
That's the whole move. It could be anywhere on the ladder, but really just focus on one buyer, one job, one useful thing. Skip it, see if it helps, extend from there. Last thought as well. Your website isn't for the person who's ready to buy today. Help first, and then the selling takes care of itself.
It's a long-term initiative. Your website's for that person who might be ready in 18 months and needs to trust you before they even get there. So yeah, if you want to see the tools we've built that are doing some of this, they're on our site. There's an accessibility checker, some downloadable templates for our discovery process, specifically around the ICP. So yeah, go to our site, check that out.
Yeah, and if this was useful, subscribe, catch the next one. Hit the bell. Tell us what you want. If there's any content that you think would be useful, we love the discussions. We're pretty actively engaged in them. So see you next time.
All right. See ya.